My life, after Arthur, my beloved husband, passed away, was a tapestry woven with grief, cherished memories, and a quiet, profound sense of solitude. He was the anchor of my existence, a steady, loving presence that had defined my world for over 40 years. When he left, a piece of me went with him, leaving behind an ache that time could only soften, never truly heal. Our son, David, was my remaining solace, a living embodiment of Arthur's legacy, and I poured all my remaining love and hope into him. I wanted nothing more than to see him happy, settled, and thriving. Arthur's passing was sudden, a heart attack that stole him away in his sleep. The initial weeks were a blur of condolences, legal formalities, and a crushing weight of emptiness. It was during the reading of his will, a few months later, that a startling revelation came to light. Arthur, ever the man of quiet surprises, had left me something I never knew existed, a sprawling, magnificent ranch, nestled deep in the heart of Texas, complete with livestock, a charming farmhouse, and acres upon acres of untouched land. He'd inherited it from a distant relative years ago, a relative I'd barely known, and had quietly managed it through a trusted lawyer, keeping it as a secret nest egg, a grand gesture he'd planned to reveal to me on our 50th anniversary. He'd called it his legacy of peace for me, should anything ever happen to him. The ranch was a world away from our comfortable suburban home, a world I hadn't known I possessed. The will stipulated that I could choose to keep its existence private for up to 2 years, giving me time to process everything, to decide its future without immediate pressure. A strange premonition, a whisper of caution in my heart, led me to embrace that privacy clause. I told no one, not even David, about the ranch. It became my secret sanctuary, a mental escape, a tangible promise of security I held close to my chest. Then, David met Tiffany. He introduced her to me with a beaming smile, his eyes sparkling with an adoration I hadn't seen in him since childhood. Tiffany was undeniably beautiful, with a cascade of blonde hair, sparkling blue eyes, and a smile that could light up a room. She was charming, articulate, and initially, seemed genuinely interested in me, asking about Arthur, listening intently to my stories. I wanted to like her, truly. My son was happy, and that was all that mattered. But even then, a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor of unease ran through me. There was a certain calculation in her gaze, a subtle, almost imperceptible air of entitlement that pricked at my intuition. They announced their engagement 6 months later. David was ecstatic, and Tiffany, of course, was radiant. But the wedding planning quickly became a showcase for Tiffany's true colors. She envisioned a lavish affair, a fairy tale wedding that spared no expense. David, usually so grounded, seemed to be swept up in her whirlwind of demands. The budget spiraled out of control, and soon, subtle hints began dropping. "Mom, we really want to make this perfect, but these venues are just so expensive," or "Tiffany has her heart set on this dress, it's a bit over budget, but it's her dream, you know?" I found myself dipping into my savings more than I'd anticipated, justifying it as a gift to my only son. It was his special day, after all. I remember one particular afternoon, Tiffany was showing me swatches for linens, her voice a little too sweet. "Eleanor, darling, you're so generous, helping us out like this. It's just that David and I are starting our lives together, and we want to do it right. You understand, don't you? Family helps family." The words were innocent enough, but the implication was heavy, a subtle pressure for more. David, sitting beside her, simply nodded, his eyes fixed on Tiffany with an almost glazed devotion. The tremor of unease grew into a persistent throb. The wedding itself was a spectacle. A grand ballroom, designer gowns, gourmet food, and a guest list that seemed to stretch for miles. I watched my son, handsome and beaming, stand beside Tiffany, who looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. I smiled, I congratulated, I played the proud mother, but inside, a quiet sorrow bloomed. I felt like an extra in their extravagant production, not a cherished member of the family. Tiffany barely spared me a glance, too busy basking in the adoration of her friends and family. Later, during the reception, I overheard her telling a friend, "Oh, David's mom is just thrilled to help us. She's so sweet," practically insisted on covering the catering. My heart sank. It wasn't true, and it wasn't fair. The honeymoon was an equally extravagant affair, a 2-week tour of Europe, complete with 5-star hotels and private tours. They posted endless photos on social media, showcasing a life of luxury that made me wince, knowing how much it must have cost. And then, they returned, not with the warm glow of newlyweds, but with an immediate return to their demanding ways. Their visits became less about family connection and more about veiled requests. "Mom, our apartment is just so small. David needs space for his home office, and I need a proper dressing room." Or, "This car is just not cutting it anymore. We really need something more reliable, and a bit more prestigious." Each conversation felt like an inventory of my assets, a subtle probing for what else I could offer. David, once so attentive and loving, had become a shadow of his former self, his responses rehearsed, his eyes avoiding mine whenever Tiffany spoke of their needs. He was no longer my son, it seemed, but Tiffany's dutiful echo. My quiet suburban home, once filled with Arthur's laughter and my son's childhood memories, began to feel like a cage. I felt like an ATM, a resource to be tapped, not a mother to be loved. The pain was immense, a dull ache that never truly subsided. I yearned for the genuine connection I once shared with David, but it seemed to have evaporated under Tiffany's influence. The ranch, my secret, became my refuge. I'd spend hours on the phone with Arthur's lawyer, Mr. Henderson, discussing its management, the livestock, the potential for renovations. It was a world where I was Eleanor, strong and capable, not just David's mother, an aging widow to be exploited. The 2-year privacy clause was nearing its end. I knew I couldn't keep the ranch a secret forever, but the timing felt crucial. My gut screamed at me, warning me not to reveal it to David and Tiffany, not yet, not until I truly understood their intentions. And then, they gave me all the clarity I needed. It was a Tuesday afternoon. They arrived unannounced, their faces grim, a pretense of concern etched onto Tiffany's features. David looked uncomfortable, avoiding my gaze. They sat me down in my living room, the very room where Arthur and I had built a life, and where David had taken his first steps. Tiffany began, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Eleanor, darling, David and I have been talking. We're so worried about you here, all alone in this big house." My heart pounded. I knew where this was going. "Worried about what, dear?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "Well," she continued, glancing at David for support, who merely grunted in agreement, "this house is just too much for one person. All those stairs, the upkeep, it's a lot, isn't it? And you're getting older. We think it's time for you to downsize." Downsize. The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken demands. Downsize to where, exactly? I asked, a chill creeping up my spine. David finally spoke, his voice weak. "Mom, Tiffany and I found this lovely little condo complex. It's got a great community center, and it's much more manageable. You'd be so much happier there." Tiffany interjected, her smile widening, revealing a predatory glint in her eyes. "And the best part is, your house, well, it's in such a prime location. It would fetch a wonderful price. Enough for your new little place, and with the rest, David and I could finally afford that dream home we've always wanted. It's a win-win, Eleanor. You get a cozy, low-maintenance life, and we get the space we need to start our family properly. My breath hitched. They weren't just suggesting I downsize, they were demanding my home, my sanctuary, the last tangible link to Arthur, to fund their lavish lifestyle. The audacity, the sheer, unadulterated greed, was breathtaking. My son, my own flesh and blood, was sitting there, tacitly approving this monstrous proposition. The quiet sorrow I'd felt at the wedding transformed into a searing rage, a cold, calculated fury that began to simmer beneath my calm exterior. I looked at David, really looked at him. His eyes were dull, his shoulders slumped. He was a puppet on Tiffany's strings, or perhaps a willing accomplice. The son I knew, the kind, thoughtful boy, was gone. And in his place was this stranger, complicit in his wife's scheme to dispossess his own mother. I took a deep breath, letting the anger fuel me, letting it solidify my resolve. You know, I began, my voice clear and cutting through the manufactured concern in the room, it's funny you mention assets. Because I do have a substantial one you're not aware of. One that makes this house, frankly, rather insignificant. Tiffany's smile faltered. David looked up, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. What are you talking about, Mom? He asked, his voice strained. My late husband, Arthur, I said, emphasizing his name, watching Tiffany visibly bridle, left me more than just this house and his pension. He left me a ranch. A very large ranch. Over 3,000 acres, complete with a working cattle operation, a beautiful farmhouse, and mineral rights. It's worth, well, let's just say it's worth several times the value of this house. The silence that followed was deafening. Tiffany's jaw dropped, her perfectly made-up face draining of color. David stared at me, his mouth agape. The initial shock quickly gave way to something else, something far uglier. Greed. Their eyes, suddenly wide and calculating, were fixed on me, no longer seeing an aging widow, but a walking, talking goldmine. A ranch? Tiffany finally managed, her voice a reedy whisper. Why didn't you tell us? Why would you keep something like that a secret? Her tone was accusatory, as if I had wronged them. Because, I said, rising slowly, feeling an immense power surge through me, Arthur's will gave me the option of privacy for a period. And my gut, that little voice inside me, told me to use it. It told me to wait. To see. And thank God I did. I walked to the fireplace, picking up a framed photo of Arthur, his kind eyes smiling back at me. You see, Arthur loved me. He wanted to ensure my future, my peace. He certainly didn't intend for his legacy to be used to fund the dream home of a woman who tries to strong-arm his widow out of her own home. Tiffany was on her feet, her composure completely shattered. Eleanor, that's not fair. We were just trying to help you. Imagine what we could do with that ranch. We could turn it into a luxury retreat, a wedding venue. David, tell her. David, finally snapping out of his stupor, stammered, Mom, she's right. That's amazing. Why wouldn't you share this with us? We're family. He even managed a pathetic, watery smile, trying to charm me, just as Tiffany had done in the beginning. I turned to face them, my gaze unwavering. No, David. We're not family. Not anymore. Not when you sit there and let your wife demand my home, my memories, my security. Not when you become a stranger who only sees me as a means to an end. My voice cracked with pain, but I pushed through it. The ranch is mine. Every single acre. And you, both of you, will not see a single penny from it. In fact, I continued, feeling a strength I hadn't known I possessed, you won't see another penny from me at all. My will is being rewritten. You are officially disinherited. I'll insure the ranch, and everything else I own goes to charities, to animal shelters, to causes that actually deserve it. Not to two greedy, ungrateful people who tried to strip me bare." Tiffany gasped, her face contorting into a mask of pure fury. "You can't do that." "David, she can't. We're your son and daughter-in-law." "Oh, I can," I replied, a cold, hard certainty in my voice. "And I will. Get out of my house. Now." They stood there, stunned, for a moment, then the accusations started. Tiffany screamed, calling me a bitter old woman, selfish, manipulative. David, to my utter heartbreak, joined in, his voice laced with venom, accusing me of ruining his life, of keeping secrets, of being cruel. It was a torrent of ugliness, but I stood firm, my heart breaking but my resolve unbreakable. I watched them storm out, slamming the door, their furious shouts echoing down the street. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't the silence of grief or loneliness, but the silence of liberation. The pain of losing David, the son I thought I knew, was immense, a wound that would take time to heal. But beneath it, a profound sense of peace began to bloom. I had protected myself. I had honored Arthur's legacy. And I had reclaimed my life. I sold my suburban house a few months later. It was a bittersweet departure, but I knew I was moving towards something better. The ranch, my beautiful, secret ranch, became my new home. I spent months renovating the farmhouse, turning it into a cozy, vibrant space. I learned about cattle, about the land, about the rhythm of a life connected to nature. I met wonderful people in the small, close-knit community nearby, people who valued genuine connection, not financial gain. I started a small animal rescue, a haven for stray dogs and cats, filling my days with purpose and unconditional love. The ranch, Arthur's legacy of peace, was exactly that. It was my sanctuary, my independence, my testament to a love that endured, and to a strength I found within myself when I needed it most. I never heard from David or Tiffany again, not directly. I saw their occasional social media posts, still showcasing an extravagant lifestyle, still hinting at financial struggles. I sometimes wondered if they ever truly understood what they had lost, not just the ranch, but the love of a mother, the warmth of family. But the truth was, it no longer mattered. My life was full, rich, and truly my own. The quiet whisper of caution that had made me keep the ranch a secret had saved me, not just from financial ruin, but from the soul-crushing exploitation of those I once loved. And for that, I would be eternally grateful.